Elena Marquez had spent 6 years building Adrian Cole into the kind of man who could walk into boardrooms without trembling. She edited his proposals, paid his debts, defended his dreams, and loved him quietly while hiding the truth no one at Whitmore Medical Group suspected. She was the secret heiress of Marquez Meridian Health, a $600 million medical empire. But Adrian mistook her humility for failure. Blinded by ambition, he abandoned Elena for Vanessa Whitmore, the dazzling daughter of his boss, Richard Whitmore, believing she was his shortcut to power. To make his victory sweeter, Adrian sent Elena a cruel wedding invitation, expecting his ordinary ex-wife to watch him marry into success. What he did not know was that Elena had just inherited controlling authority over the very empire Richard needed to save his collapsing company. When she entered the Grand Meridian Hotel in an ivory suit, flanked by bodyguards, attorneys, and board members, the wedding turned silent. Adrian laughed first. Then Elena revealed the stolen research, falsified reports, and corporate lies that tied him to Whitmore's fraud. By the time she finished speaking, his marriage, career, fortune, and future were gone before every guest who had admired him. The first time Adrian Cole saw Elena Marquez cry, she was not crying for herself. She was sitting on the cold tile floor of their first apartment, still wearing the Navy hospital scrubs she had worked in for 13 hours, with a stack of Adrian's rejected job applications spread around her like fallen leaves. Their kitchen light flickered overhead, buzzing in that cheap way cheap lights did when landlords kept promising to fix them and never came. Rain tapped the single window over the sink. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, then faded into the long grey throat of the city. Adrian had thrown the papers across the room 20 minutes earlier. He had not thrown them at Elena, not exactly, but one sheet had brushed her cheek as it flew past, and another had landed in the cooling pasta she had made because she knew he liked garlic butter when he was upset. He had cursed the hospitals that would not hire him, the medical suppliers who would not return his calls, the recruiters who told him he lacked experience, the classmates from business school who had already begun wearing expensive watches and posting photos from rooftop bars. "I'm nothing," he had said, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. "I'm 30 years old and I'm nothing." Elena had gone quiet. That was what she did when pain entered the room. She did not fight it loudly. She studied it, absorbed it, and reached for the part of it she could heal. Then she lowered herself beside the mess of papers and began gathering them one by one. "You're not nothing," she said. He laughed bitterly. "That's easy for you to say. You don't care about being somebody." The words should have wounded her. Perhaps they did. But she only folded the corner of one resume back into shape, smoothed it against her knee, and looked up at him with the patient tenderness that had once made him feel like the luckiest man alive. "I care," she said softly. "I just don't think being somebody begins with a title." At the time, Adrian had thought that was love. Years later, standing at an altar beside another woman, while a ballroom full of executives waited for him to kiss the daughter of his boss, Adrian would remember the sound of that kitchen light, that tiny electric buzz, that rain at the window, that pale sheet of paper Elena had smoothed as if his future were something precious enough to mend. But by then, the memory would come too late to save him. Elena had loved Adrian before ambition carved him hollow. They met at St. Aurelia Hospital, a sprawling old medical center with marble floors in the lobby and cracked paint in the staff corridors. Adrian had been a sales associate for a minor pharmaceutical distributor, the kind who carried sample cases, wore suits too tight in the shoulders, and smiled harder than the doctors trusted. Elena worked in clinical research coordination, managing patient consent forms, trial data, and the quiet emergencies that never appeared in glossy hospital brochures. He noticed her because she did not notice him. That bothered him at first. Adrian had always relied on charm the way some men relied on money. He knew how to tilt his head when listening, how to lower his voice when offering sympathy, how to make a person feel briefly selected by the sun. Nurses liked him. Receptionists remembered him. Even irritated department heads softened when he apologized with a half smile. Elena, however, treated him with calm professionalism and no more. "Dr. Patel is in clinic until 4, she told him the first day he tried to linger at her desk. "You can leave the materials with administration. I was told to hand them directly to him. Then you can wait in the physician's lounge. Are you always this strict?" She looked at him then, really looked, with eyes that were warm but not fooled. "Only when people waste time in hospitals," she said. He laughed because he did not know what else to do. She returned to her paperwork. Later, he learned that Alina had started working at 16 in small clinics during school breaks, then through university, then through a series of research fellowships. She had watched patients sign forms with shaking hands. She had watched families count coins in cafeterias while deciding who could afford to take another day off work. She had learned early that illness did not ask whether a person was rich, worthy, educated, loved, or ready. It simply entered, and the world became divided between those who helped and those who profited from panic. Adrian found this seriousness compelling. It made Alina seem older than him, though she was 2 years younger. It made her laughter rarer and more valuable. When she finally smiled at one of his jokes 3 months after they met, he felt absurdly victorious. Their courtship was built from small things: coffee during late shifts, a lost umbrella shared in a storm, vending machine dinners eaten beside a window overlooking the ambulance bay. Adrian told her he had grown up in a rented duplex with a father who believed success meant escaping every room that had ever looked down on you. Alina told him her mother had died when she was young and her father had become distant. She said little else about her family, and Adrian, then still capable of humility, did not press. What she did not tell him was that her mother, Isabella Marquez, had founded Marquez Meridian Health after exposing malpractice and corruption at the hospital where she had once been an overworked resident. Isabella had begun with a small diagnostic clinic and built it into a national medical network known for ethical research, rural outreach, and aggressive patient protection policies. By the time she died, Marquez Meridian Health was valued at roughly $600 million, though Isabella had cared far more about the free pediatric wing bearing her name than any valuation. Alina did not tell Adrian that the old medical pin she kept in a velvet box had belonged to Isabella on the day she opened her first clinic. She did not tell him about the trustees, the sealed will, the private board, or the inheritance structure that would one day decide whether she became merely wealthy or truly powerful. She did not tell him because she had been raised among people who became kind in front of money and cruel away from it. Her mother had warned her about that. "When someone thinks you have nothing to give," Isabella once said, buttoning a white coat over a navy dress while Alina sat on her bedroom rug with a doll missing one shoe, "watch what they take from you anyway." Alina had been too young to understand. Years later, she would hear those words every time Adrian asked her to proofread a presentation at midnight, every time he kissed her forehead while sliding a pile of unpaid bills toward her, every time he said, "You're better with words than I am, Lena. Just help me make it sound right." She helped because she loved him. At first, Adrian deserved some of that love. He was not born heartless. He brought soup when she was sick. He held her hand at her mother's memorial anniversary, even though he never fully understood why Alina stood alone before a mausoleum guarded by private security. He once spent his last $50 repairing her old car because she had a night shift and the buses stopped running after midnight. He wrote her notes on napkins, little clumsy promises that she tucked into books and coat pockets. "I'll build us a better life. One day you'll never worry again. You believed in me before anyone else did." For a while, Alina believed those notes were prophecies. Their wedding was small, almost secret. They married in a city hall ceremony on a bright Thursday morning. With 2 hospital co-workers as witnesses and a lunch of street tacos afterward. Adrian's suit was borrowed. Alina's dress cost less than the shoes Vanessa Whitmore would later wear to their engagement party. But Alina had pinned her mother's vintage medical pin inside the dress, hidden close to her heart, and when Adrian slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, she thought of Isabella's warning and decided, with the reckless hope of a woman in love, that warnings did not have to become destiny. For the first 3 years, marriage was work and warmth. They lived in a narrow apartment above a laundromat. Their walls smelled faintly of detergent in the mornings and fried onions from the restaurant downstairs at night. Elena worked long shifts at St. Aurelia. Adrian bounced between sales jobs, junior partnership roles, and contract consulting work that promised much and paid little. He hated every rejection, but he loved the way Elena believed in him afterward. She became his unofficial strategist. She rewrote his cover letters. She taught him the language of patient outcomes and ethical procurement. She explained how hospital boards thought, how research committees evaluated risk, how supply chain decisions affected patient care. He absorbed her knowledge hungrily. She was proud of him for wanting to learn. She did not yet realize that he was learning how to sound principled without becoming principled. When he finally landed a role at Whitmore Medical Group, he lifted Elena off the floor and spun her around their kitchen. "Assistant Director of Partnerships," he shouted. "Do you hear that, Director Track?" Elena laughed, breathless, her arms around his neck. "I hear it. This is it, Lena. This is the door." She kissed him, tasting coffee and relief, then walked through it well. He did not understand why she said well instead of proudly or quickly or finally. Years later, she would remember that choice of word as the first little bell of warning. Even then, some hidden part of her had known that doors did not only reveal what was ahead, they revealed who people became once they were allowed inside. Whitmore Medical Group occupied the top 12 floors of a mirrored building downtown. Its lobby had white orchids, black stone, and an abstract sculpture that looked expensive without looking like anything in particular. Adrian came home from his first week, intoxicated by it. "You should see them," he said, dropping his briefcase on their couch. "Everyone moves differently there, like they know the world is waiting for them." Elena was chopping vegetables at the counter. "Hospitals are not supposed to make the world wait." "That's not what I mean." "I know." "No, you don't." His tone sharpened, then softened when he saw her look up. "Sorry, I just mean it's different from St. Aurelia, bigger, cleaner, more serious." St. Aurelia had treated Elena like family for years. Its research department was underfunded, its elevators unreliable, its staff exhausted. But Elena had watched miracles happen there in rooms with peeling paint and old curtains. She had watched nurses save lives on salaries Whitmore executives would not have considered adequate for assistants. "Bigger is not always more serious," she said. Adrian smiled in the way he had begun to smile when he thought she was being idealistic. "You'll understand when I get higher up." The phrase stayed with her. Higher up. He began using it often. Higher up people didn't worry about bus schedules. Higher up, people ordered wine without checking the price. Higher up, people wore watches that announced they had arrived before they said a word. Higher up, people did not pack leftovers in plastic containers. Higher up, wives attended charity luncheons and knew which fork to use and did not smell faintly of antiseptic after long shifts. Elena watched him change one detail at a time. He bought new suits before paying down debt. He started correcting her pronunciation of names she had known longer than he had. He replaced their framed City Hall photo with a large abstract print because he said the apartment looked too sentimental. He asked whether she had ever considered doing something with herself beyond paperwork, though the paperwork he mocked involved clinical trials that could determine whether vulnerable patients received safe treatment. When she challenged him, he apologized. At first, "I'm stressed," he would say. "I didn't mean it." Then the apologies became explanations. "You know how this industry is. Image matters." Then they became accusations. "You don't understand what I'm trying to become." At Whitmore, Adrian rose quickly. He was handsome, prepared, and unusually fluent in the language of research ethics for a man whose formal experience was mostly sales. His reports had an elegance Richard Whitmore admired. His presentations contained patient-centered phrasing that made investors nod solemnly. His procurement proposals balanced profitability with moral language. He sounded like a man who cared deeply. Elena knew because most of those phrases had been born at their kitchen table. Not stolen, she told herself at first. Shared, Marriage made certain things joint. A husband's success could be a wife's joy. A wife's mind could support a husband's ambition without needing applause. But sometimes, late at night, she would wake to find Adrian in the blue glow of his laptop, copying sections from old documents she had drafted for him, rearranging sentences, deleting her comments from the margins. Once, half asleep, she asked, "Did you cite the St. Aurelia research guidelines?" He did not turn around. "It's internal," he said. "That doesn't mean you can present it as original." He closed the laptop halfway. "You helped me write it. I helped you understand it." He looked at her then, and for a brief second she saw irritation before he covered it with charm. "Lena, don't make everything so rigid. This is how corporate work happens." Her mother's voice moved through memory like a hand brushing a curtain. "Watch what they take from you anyway." At the time, Elena chose not to hear it. The first time Vanessa Whitmore appeared in Adrian's life, she came home with him as a scent. Not physically, not yet, but his jacket carried perfume Elena did not own, something sharp and expensive, with a sweetness that seemed designed to remain after the woman had left. Adrian tossed the jacket over a chair and kissed Elena's cheek without warmth. "Long day," he said. "There's dinner. I ate at the office. You didn't text." "Forgot." She stood at the stove, one hand on the lid of a pot, and looked at the man who used to send her photos of vending machine sandwiches with captions like, "Tragic dinner. Wish you were here." "Who was there?" she asked. He opened the refrigerator, though he had just said he had eaten. "What?" "At the office dinner. People. Adrian." He sighed. "Richard, some board members, Vanessa." The name landed gently, almost innocently. "Vanessa. His daughter, she's joining strategy." Elena stirred the soup, even though it did not need stirring. "I didn't know his daughter worked there." "She didn't. She was in London or Geneva, somewhere like that. She's back now." He said it casually, but casualness had a shape. Elena had learned that from patient interviews. People confessed most when they believed they were concealing something. Over the next months, Vanessa became a recurring shadow. Vanessa had recommended a tailor. Vanessa thought Adrian should attend the Whitmore Gala. Vanessa said the partnership deck needed more confidence. Vanessa's friends knew investors. Vanessa's father valued loyalty. Vanessa understood the world Adrian was entering. One evening, Elena found him standing before their bathroom mirror, practicing a speech. He wore a black tuxedo she had never seen before. "When did you buy that?" she asked. "Rented," he said too quickly, "for the gala." "That's tonight." "I told you." "No, you didn't." He adjusted his cufflinks. They were silver with a small engraved W. "Right, sorry, it's been hectic. I can get dressed." He froze. "What?" "For the gala." His reflection looked at hers. In the mirror, they seemed like strangers occupying the same room. "It's not really spouses," he said. "Your director's wife is going. You mentioned that last week." He smiled, embarrassed for her rather than himself. "That's different. She's on the foundation committee. I work in medical research. At St. Aurelia." The name of the hospital sounded shabby in his mouth. Elena said nothing. Adrian turned around, softened his voice, and touched her shoulder. "Lena, don't take it personally. These events are political. You'd be bored. I have sat through 6-hour ethics reviews." "That's not what I mean." "I know what you mean." He dropped his hand. "Then don't make me say it." But he had already said enough. After he left, Elena sat alone at the kitchen table, the place where his best presentations had been born. She opened an old box of her mother's things and took out the vintage medical pin. It was small, gold, shaped like a caduceus, but softened by age. Isabella had worn it not as decoration, but as a promise. Elena pinned it to the inside of her cardigan, where no one could see it. Then she opened her laptop and reviewed 3 confidential documents sent by the Marquez Meridian trustees. She had been working quietly with them for years, fulfilling the strange and demanding terms of Isabella's will. 5 years of ground-level service outside the family empire. 5 years without using the Marquez name for advantage. 5 years proving she could recognize the healthcare system from the patient floor before she ever governed it from the boardroom. Only 6 months remained. At the bottom of the newest document, one phrase caught her eye. Potential merger candidate, Whitmore Medical Group. Elena stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Outside, rain began tapping the window. Adrian came home at 2:17 a.m., smiling at his phone. He did not know she was awake. He stood in the dark living room, loosened his tie, and listened to a voice message on low volume. Elena could not hear every word, but she heard the laugh at the end. A woman's laugh, confident and lazy, as if the world had always made room for her. Adrian noticed Elena only when the lamp clicked on. "You scared me," he said. "I waited up. You shouldn't have. How was the gala?" "Fine. Just fine." He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Successful." The silence between them stretched. "Vanessa looked beautiful," Elena said. His eyes sharpened. "What?" "I saw the photos." He exhaled, annoyed. "They tagged everyone. It was a public event. In the photo, your hand was on her waist. It was a crowded room. Were all the rooms crowded?" He stared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" It was the first time Elena almost said everything. She almost told him her full name meant something beyond a hospital ID badge. She almost told him Richard Whitmore's company was being evaluated by people who respected quiet evidence more than loud charm. She almost told him that the woman he considered ordinary had sat in private strategy calls with trustees who controlled more capital than Vanessa had ever posed beside. But the words stayed behind her teeth. Something old and protective held them there. She remembered being 11, hiding beneath a banquet table while her mother hosted a fundraiser. 2 men nearby, unaware of the child listening beneath the linen, had praised Isabella's brilliance in public and called her useful in private. One had joked that marrying into Marquez money would be easier than earning it. Isabella had found Elena afterward in the hallway, pale with anger. "Never reveal your crown to someone who only knows how to kneel before gold," her mother had told her. "Make them meet you as a person first." Elena looked at Adrian in the yellow lamplight. He had met her as a person. But had he loved her as one? "I'm tired," she said at last. Adrian took that as surrender. The affair, when it fully began, did not announce itself with lipstick on collars or dramatic hotel receipts. It revealed itself through absence. Adrian stopped asking about Elena's day. He stopped leaving space for her in conversations. He took calls in the hallway. He laughed at messages and dimmed the screen when she passed. He began saying "my future" instead of "our future." Vanessa was bolder. She sent gifts to the office for Adrian, then posted photos of business lunches with captions crafted to wound anyone paying attention. "Building empires with brilliant minds. Strategy looks good in Navy. Some men are born for more." Elena did not confront Vanessa, not because she was afraid, but because she knew women like Vanessa collected confrontation as proof of victory. Elena had seen wealthy donors humiliate nurses and then call their tears unprofessional. She had watched powerful families treat restraint as weakness until the restrained person obtained legal authority. So Elena waited. She observed. She saved copies of documents Adrian left open on their home printer. She recorded dates when his reports matched language from her private research notes. She noticed inconsistencies in Whitmore's public merger statements. Numbers shifted. Procurement timelines blurred. Charitable investment claims sounded inflated. Richard Whitmore's polished interviews carried the same artificial shine as the lobby sculpture downstairs, costly, impressive, and hollow. Still, her heart resisted what her mind already knew. On their 6th anniversary, Elena decided to give Adrian one final opening. She booked a table at the little Italian restaurant where they had eaten after his first Whitmore promotion, before the suits became sharper and his eyes became colder. She wore a deep green dress he used to love, simple pearl earrings, and the gold medical pin on her lapel, visible this time. In her purse was a small wrapped gift, a leather portfolio engraved with his initials and a note inside. "I am still here, but I need to know if you are." She arrived early. She ordered sparkling water. She watched couples enter, laugh, sit, reach across tables. At 7:30, she checked her phone. At 7:45, she sent a text. "Are you close?" No reply. At 8:10, the waiter asked whether she wanted to order. She smiled apologetically and said she would wait a little longer. At 8:32, her phone lit up with a social media notification because an old colleague had tagged the hospital in a gala photo. Elena did not know why she opened it. Perhaps some part of her already knew the wound had arrived and wanted to stop fearing it. There was Adrian. He stood beneath chandeliers beside Vanessa Whitmore, who wore a silver gown and rested her hand on his chest. Richard Whitmore stood on his other side, smiling with proprietary approval. The caption read, "Celebrating the future of Whitmore Medical Group and the visionary partnerships that will take us higher." Higher. The word blurred. Elena placed cash on the table, though she had ordered nothing but water. She walked outside into the cold. The gift remained in her purse, unopened, its sharp little corners pressing against her side like a warning. Adrian came home after midnight. This time, he did not bother pretending. He entered the apartment with the faint impatience of a man already elsewhere. Elena sat on the couch, still wearing the green dress. The medical pin caught the light. His eyes flicked to it. "What's that?" "My mother." "HM." He did not ask more. "I waited for you," she said. He removed his watch and placed it carefully on the table. A new watch, very expensive, not the kind of thing a man on Adrian's salary bought without help or debt. "I know. You knew. I forgot about the reservation." "No, Adrian, you forgot about me." That annoyed him, not because it was unfair, but because it was true. He looked around the apartment, and Elena saw what he saw. The old books, the practical sofa, the framed photograph he had not yet replaced in the bedroom, the woman who had known him when he was still afraid to hope. "I can't keep doing this," he said. The sentence arrived calmly, prepared. Elena's hands went still in her lap. "Doing what?" "Pretending this marriage fits who I am now." There it was, not guilt, not confession, a rebranding. "Who are you now?" she asked. He laughed under his breath. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like I'm the villain because I grew." "Is that what you call it?" He paced once, then stopped near the window. "Vanessa and I understand each other. She knows the level I'm operating on. She knows what's at stake. With you, everything is small. Your job, your routines, your moral lectures. My moral lectures helped build your career." His face hardened. "You helped type a few things." Elena felt that more than she expected. "A few things," she repeated. "Yes, Elena, a few things. You act like I owe you my life because you proofread presentations and made dinner when I was tired." She stood then, slowly. "I paid your loan installment when your contract fell through." "I paid you back." "No, you didn't. You said it didn't matter." "It didn't when we were building together." He gave a cold smile. "That's the problem. You think suffering together is love. I don't want to suffer anymore." "And Vanessa. Vanessa is my future." Elena looked at him for a long time. She searched his face for the man who had once stood in their cheap kitchen with rain in his hair and promised to build a better life for both of them. She could not find him. Perhaps he had never been as real as she believed. Perhaps ambition had not changed him. Only exposed him. "I want a divorce," he said. The room seemed to grow very quiet. There are moments in life when people expect women to collapse, to scream, to beg, to bargain against abandonment as if love were a contract still under negotiation. Adrian expected tears. Elena could see it in the way he braced himself, already bored by grief he had caused. Instead, she removed her wedding ring. Not dramatically, not angrily. She simply slipped it from her finger and placed it on the coffee table between them. "All right," she said. He blinked. "That's it. What else would you like?" "I just thought that I would make it hard for you." His silence answered. Elena picked up her purse and removed the small wrapped gift. She set it beside the ring. "I bought this for you tonight," she said. "Keep it or throw it away." "What is it?" "A reminder." Then she walked into the bedroom and closed the door. On the other side, Adrian stood in the living room, suddenly irritated by the feeling that he had not won properly. He opened the gift after several minutes. Inside was the leather portfolio, his initials engraved in gold. Beneath it lay the note. "I am still here, but I need to know if you are." For reasons he would not admit, he tore the note in half before throwing it away. The divorce moved quickly because Adrian wanted it that way and Elena did not resist. He had already found a luxury apartment arranged through Whitmore connections. He took the newer furniture, the espresso machine, the television, and 2 crystal glasses they had received from a neighbor as a wedding gift. Elena kept the books, the old car, the kitchen table, and the velvet box containing her mother's pin. "You're being very reasonable," Adrian said at the final signing, as if complimenting a subordinate. Elena capped her pen. "I'm being finished." He frowned. Vanessa waited outside the law office in a white coat draped over her shoulders, though it was not cold. She looked Elena up and down with the delighted cruelty of someone expecting devastation. "You're handling this better than I thought," Vanessa said. Elena met her eyes. "You thought about me." Vanessa's smile thinned. "Only because Adrian is kind, he worries." "Does he?" "He hates seeing people cling to what they can't keep." Elena felt Adrian watching, waiting for a reaction. She gave Vanessa a small, almost gentle smile. "Then be careful what you hold." Vanessa laughed after Elena walked away, but not immediately. The delay was small. Adrian noticed it, though he told himself he did not. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Adrian proposed. The engagement announcement appeared in business magazines before Elena heard it from anyone directly. Adrian Cole, rising executive at Whitmore Medical Group, engaged to Vanessa Whitmore, strategy director and daughter of CEO Richard Whitmore. The photographs were immaculate. Vanessa's diamond flashed like a small, hard star. Adrian looked triumphant, his hand resting on the waist of the woman who had become both lover and ladder. Elena saw the announcement while sitting in a private elevator, ascending to the 27th floor of the Marquez Meridian headquarters. Unlike Whitmore's mirrored tower, Marquez Meridian's headquarters did not try to impress through cold luxury. Its walls displayed photographs of clinics, research teams, mobile units, and patients whose stories had shaped company policy. A bronze plaque near the lobby bore Isabella Marquez's words, "Medicine without conscience is commerce wearing a white coat." Elena had passed that plaque as a child holding her mother's hand. She had passed it again at 22 after Isabella's funeral, numb with grief and surrounded by board members who spoke in careful tones. She passed it now at 34, no longer a hidden daughter grieving in hallways, but a woman arriving at the end of a test she had not always wanted but had come to understand. The boardroom was full when she entered. Some faces were familiar from childhood. Camilla Reyes, the general counsel who had once braided Elena's hair during a long board retreat, Dr. Samuel Okonkwo, chief medical officer, who had sent her anatomy books for her 15th birthday, Henry Vale, the CFO, whose expressions were so dry they seemed legally binding. Others were newer, chosen by trustees during Elena's years outside the company. At the head of the table sat Margaret Ives, chair of the trust and Isabella's oldest friend. She was 72, silver-haired, elegant, and feared by men who mistook age for softness. Elena, Margaret said. No one called her Mrs. Cole. No one had called her that here, ever. Elena took her seat. Margaret opened a leather folder. Your mother's conditions have been satisfied. 5 years of direct healthcare service outside Marquez Meridian influence. No use of family capital for professional advancement. Independent evaluations from supervisors, patients, and compliance monitors. Continued education in health systems administration. Quarterly ethics reviews. You have met every requirement. Henry Vale slid a document forward. Upon final signature, controlling voting authority transfers to you, he said. You will assume the role of executive chair pending public announcement. Elena looked at the pen. For 5 years, she had imagined this moment as a door, but sitting there, she understood it was not a door at all. It was a weight. Her mother had not designed the will to punish her. She had designed it to protect the company from becoming merely inherited. Isabella had known that wealth without service created rulers who confused ownership with wisdom. She had forced Elena to see hospitals from the ground, to be ignored, overworked, underestimated, and still responsible. She had forced her to know what decisions cost when they traveled downward. Elena signed. No thunder sounded, no crown appeared, only ink settled into paper. Margaret watched her carefully. There is one immediate matter requiring your review. Henry touched a screen. The wall display changed. Whitmore Medical Group, proposed strategic merger. Elena's spine straightened. No one in the room missed it. We can reassign preliminary review if this presents a conflict, Camilla said. Elena looked at the Whitmore logo, then at the projected financial summary. Richard Whitmore's smiling publicity portrait sat in the corner beside a list of claimed assets, projected partnerships, and patient network expansion goals. Adrian's department had prepared several supporting documents. No, Elena said, I'll review it. Margaret's gaze sharpened, not with disapproval, but recognition. Thoroughly, Elena added. The first lie was small. A procurement line listed rural diagnostic equipment purchases at a rate inconsistent with vendor data Elena had seen while working at St. Aurelia. She might have overlooked it if she were the kind of executive who trusted polished summaries. But she remembered a night 3 years earlier when a Whitmore-affiliated clinic had transferred patients to St. Aurelia because its imaging system had been temporarily unavailable for the 4th time that month. She remembered a nurse muttering, "They claim to have machines they don't maintain." The second lie was larger. Partnership Impact Report used language from an ethics framework Elena had drafted privately for Adrian during his 2nd year at Whitmore. Entire paragraphs remained recognizable, though altered enough to look original to anyone else. Her phrase measurable dignity had become dignity-centered metrics. Her warning about vulnerable populations had become a selling point. Her careful distinction between patient access and market penetration had been blurred until it sounded profitable. The third lie was criminal enough to make Camilla remove her glasses. Emails showed internal pressure to classify certain consulting payments as community outreach expenses. Supplier contracts carried inflated figures. A shell vendor appeared repeatedly across Whitmore projects connected to Richard's inner circle. Adrian's name appeared on approvals, revisions, and partnership decks. He had not designed the entire deception, but he had helped package it. He knew, Camilla said, scanning the documents late one evening in a secure conference room. Elena stood by the window, looking down at the city. From that height, traffic looked like moving blood through illuminated veins. Yes, Elena said. You understand what this means. It means Whitmore is using the merger to survive scrutiny. And Adrian Cole. Elena turned from the window. It means he sold them credibility he did not own. Camilla studied her face. Do you want to handle this privately? Elena almost smiled. That would be convenient for him. I mean for you. For you, the word softened something in Elena. People assumed power erased pain, but it did not. It only gave pain better furniture. There were nights she still woke reaching for a husband who had trained her body to expect his absence before he left. There were mornings she made coffee for two by instinct and poured half of it down the sink. Betrayal did not vanish when lawyers handed you evidence. It became cleaner, sharper, easier to name. "I don't want revenge," Elena said. Camilla waited. "I want the truth positioned where it can't be buried. That may destroy him." Elena looked back at the city. "No," she said, "it will reveal what he built." The wedding invitation arrived 3 days later. It came in a thick ivory envelope addressed to Ms. Elena Marquez, which meant Adrian had used her maiden name either to wound her or because Vanessa refused to acknowledge the married one. The calligraphy was flawless. The paper smelled faintly of roses. Elena opened it at her kitchen table, the same old table Adrian had left behind because he said it made the apartment look poor. The wedding would be held at the Grand Meridian Hotel in the Aurelia Ballroom at 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. Elena paused. The Grand Meridian Hotel belonged to a hospitality subsidiary under Marquez Meridian Holdings, acquired years ago to support medical conferences, visiting specialists, and philanthropic events. It was one of Isabella's practical luxuries, a place designed to host donors who liked chandeliers while funding clinics that did not have enough chairs. Inside the invitation, a smaller card slipped free. Vanessa's handwriting was sharp and decorative. "You should come, it might inspire you to aim higher next time." On the back, Adrian had added his own note. "No hard feelings. I hope seeing what real success looks like gives you closure." Elena sat very still. A memory rose without permission. Adrian on the floor years ago, hands shaking after another rejection, whispering, "I'm nothing." Elena kneeling beside him, gathering the papers, giving him language, courage, structure, warmth. Elena telling him he was not nothing. Now he wanted her to come watch him marry into what he thought was power. She almost laughed. Instead, she placed the invitation beside the Whitmore merger file. The foreshadowing had always been there, she realized. In every time Adrian admired a locked door more than the person holding it open. In every time Vanessa wrote online about future empires without knowing whose empire had already begun evaluating hers. In every time Richard Whitmore praised transparency while sending incomplete data. In every time Adrian said higher up, never once asking what might be above him. Margaret Ives called that evening. "I assume you received it," she said. "I did. Are you going?" Elena looked at the invitation. "Would my mother?" Margaret was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried memory. "Your mother once attended a banquet where a hospital board planned to sell patient debt portfolios to private collectors. They invited her because they thought she was too young to understand the documents. She let them finish dessert before she ended their careers." Despite everything, Elena smiled. "She sounds dramatic." She was precise. People confused the two. Elena touched the gold medical pin lying beside the invitation. "Then I'll be precise." The week before the wedding, Whitmore Medical Group sparkled in public and bled in private. Richard Whitmore pushed his executives to finalize merger optimism statements. Vanessa treated the wedding like a coronation. Adrian moved through meetings with the energized arrogance of a man who believed every gamble had paid off. He had secured the boss's daughter, the boss's favor, a likely promotion after the merger, and a future in which no one would remember the quiet wife who had once packed his lunches. But there were signs he ignored. A compliance analyst resigned without explanation. One of Whitmore's outside attorneys requested archived procurement files twice in one day. A vendor stopped returning calls. Richard shouted behind closed doors, then emerged smiling. Vanessa's wedding planner complained that Marquez Meridian's hotel management had suddenly become insufferably strict about security protocols. Adrian noticed these things and dismissed them. Ambitious men often call warning signs inconvenience, when they are too close to winning. On the morning of the wedding, Elena woke before sunrise. Her apartment was quiet. She had moved after the divorce, not into a mansion or penthouse, but into a spacious old townhouse with tall windows, warm wood floors, and a small garden where rosemary grew stubbornly through winter. She liked places that had survived weather. On her dresser lay two outfits. One was a black dress, elegant and understated. The other was an ivory suit tailored so perfectly it seemed less worn than declared. Beside it rested her mother's pin. Elena chose the suit. As she dressed, a memory returned, clear as glass. Isabella standing before a mirror years ago, fastening that same pin to her lapel. Elena had been 14, angry because girls at school had mocked her for arriving with a driver after she had tried so hard to seem ordinary. "Why can't people just be honest about what they want from me?" Elena had demanded. Isabella had looked at her in the mirror, because many people are not honest with themselves first. How do you know who to trust? You watch what they do when they think there is no reward. Elena fastened the pin now. Its clasp clicked softly. At 4 o'clock, a black sedan arrived outside her townhouse, then another, then a third. Her legal team rode in the second vehicle. Security rode in the first and third. Not because Elena feared Adrian, but because public exposure of corporate fraud attracted unpredictable desperation, and Camilla Reyes believed in preventing drama from becoming danger. "You're certain?" Camilla asked from the seat beside her as the city slid past. Elena looked through the window. Bridesmaids in pale blue dresses hurried into a salon. A florist unloaded white roses. A man in a delivery uniform smoked beside a van, staring at nothing. Life continued, indifferent to reckonings. "I'm certain," she said. "Once this begins, it won't stay contained." "It was never contained, it was only hidden." Camilla nodded. At the Grand Meridian Hotel, guests began arriving beneath a canopy of white flowers and gold lights. The lobby gleamed. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. Journalists from business lifestyle magazines photographed donors, executives, and hospital board members. The wedding had been planned not only as a romantic event, but as a public alignment of families, companies, and capital. Adrian stood in a private groom's room, adjusting his cufflinks. They were the same silver Whitmore cufflinks he had worn the night Elena first asked about Vanessa. He considered them lucky. Vanessa had given them to him before they were lovers, pressing the box into his palm after a strategy dinner and saying, "You should wear symbols that match where you belong." He had believed her. One of his groomsmen, a Whitmore finance manager named Lewis, leaned against the bar cart. "Big night," Lewis said. "Big life," Adrian replied. Lewis laughed, but uneasily. "You hear anything about the merger review?" Adrian's hands stilled for half a second. "What about it?" "Just chatter. Marquez Meridian's been quiet." "They're always quiet. Old money healthcare people, they think silence is dignity." "Do you know who their final decision maker is?" Adrian smiled. "Some board relic probably." "You sure?" "Lewis, relax. Richard has it handled." Lewis looked unconvinced, but Vanessa swept in before he could answer. She wore a custom gown with pearl beading and a veil long enough to require 2 assistants. She was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful, polished, curated, untouchable until the bill arrives. "Why do you look tense?" she asked Adrian. "I'm not." "Good, my father needs tonight clean. Investors are watching." "Our wedding," Adrian said lightly, "or the merger?" Vanessa gave him a look. "Don't be sentimental, you knew what this was." A small chill moved through him. Then she smiled and touched his cheek. "Relax, after tonight you'll be family." Family was the word Adrian had chased all his life, though he had called it success. He had wanted to belong somewhere no one could dismiss him. He had wanted rooms to open when he approached. He had wanted powerful men to clap him on the shoulder and beautiful women to assume he deserved them. Elena had offered belonging when he had nothing, but she had offered it in a laundromat apartment with old furniture and tired eyes. He had mistaken it for failure because it did not come with witnesses. Downstairs, guests took their seats in the Aurelia ballroom. White orchids climbed the columns, a string quartet played near the stage, cameras waited discreetly along the side aisles. Richard Whitmore stood near the front, shaking hands and laughing too loudly. Every few seconds, his gaze flicked toward the entrance. He had received a message that morning from Marquez Meridian's legal office confirming that a representative might attend the ceremony. That was all. No name, no title, no explanation. It unsettled him. Richard Whitmore had built his company through polish and pressure. He understood wealthy donors, ambitious doctors, weak regulators, and board members who preferred good news over accurate news. But Marquez Meridian Health had always frustrated him. It was too disciplined, too patient, too moral in ways that were expensive to imitate. A merger with them would not merely save Whitmore Medical Group from debt, it would cleanse it. He needed that cleansing. He needed it before auditors found the payments, before suppliers talked, before his daughter's wedding became the last glamorous event before collapse. At 6:03 p.m., the ceremony began. Vanessa walked down the aisle to a swell of strings. Guests turned, admired, whispered. Adrian watched her approach and felt victory rise in him like heat. She was the proof, the prize, the gleaming answer to every person who had ever underestimated him. As Vanessa reached him, she glanced toward the side doors. "Is she here?" she whispered. Adrian knew who she meant. He smirked, probably too embarrassed. Vanessa's lips curved. Pity. The officiant began speaking about commitment, partnership, and the joining of futures. Adrian barely listened. He scanned the front row, Richard, pale but smiling, executives, investors, foundation chairs. This was the audience he had always deserved. Then the ballroom doors opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the sound to travel. Heads turned. Elena entered alone at first. For one suspended second, Adrian saw only his ex-wife. No tears, no black mourning dress, no trembling hands. She wore an ivory suit that caught the light with quiet authority. Her hair was swept back, her face calm, her mother's gold medical pin gleaming on her lapel. Then 6 security officers entered behind her. Then Camilla Reyes. Then Henry Vale. Then Margaret Ives. Then Dr. Samuel Okonkwo. The room changed before anyone spoke. It was not simply surprise, it was recognition moving unevenly through the powerful. A hospital board chair leaned toward his wife. An investor straightened. Richard Whitmore's smile died so suddenly it looked unplugged. Adrian, not understanding, laughed. It was the worst mistake he could have made. He stepped away from the altar and lifted the microphone from its stand with the easy cruelty of a man who believed the room belonged to him. "Elena," he said, his voice amplified across the ballroom, "this is a wedding, not a job interview. Did you borrow those bodyguards to feel successful for one day?" A few people laughed, because people often laugh when power gives them permission. But the laughter faded quickly. Elena did not blush. She did not look away. She walked down the aisle at an unhurried pace, flanked now by security and counsel. The click of her heels against the polished floor sounded impossibly clear. Adrian's smile faltered. Vanessa stared at the people behind Elena, her face tightening. Richard took one step forward. "Ms. Marquez." The microphone caught it. "Ms. Marquez." A whisper spread. Elena stopped halfway down the aisle. She looked at Adrian, then at Vanessa, then at the guests. "Thank you for the invitation," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried. The hotel's sound technicians, trained for conferences and awards ceremonies, had already adjusted to the second microphone Camilla handed her. Adrian's hand tightened around his own mic. "What is this?" Elena's gaze returned to him. "You said you hoped seeing real success would give me closure." The silence became absolute. I came, she continued, because you were right about one thing. Closure sometimes requires witnesses. Vanessa turned to her father. Daddy. Richard did not answer. Camilla stepped forward. For those who have not been formally introduced, this is Elena Marquez, controlling shareholder and incoming executive chair of Marquez Meridian Health. For a heartbeat, the sentence seemed too large for the room. Then it landed everywhere at once. Guests gasped. Someone dropped a program. Louis, standing near the groomsmen, whispered a curse. Vanessa's face emptied. Adrian stared at Elena as if seeing her through water. No, he said. Elena tilted her head slightly. It was almost kind. My mother was Isabella Marquez, she said. I chose to work under a shortened name while fulfilling the terms of her will. I completed those terms recently. Adrian's mind, desperate and panicked, threw memories at him in fragments. The mausoleum with private security, the old pin, Elena's careful silence about family, the way hospital executives at St. Aurelia had sometimes treated her with puzzling respect, the expensive legal envelope he once found in their mail and never asked about because he assumed it was debt. Vanessa's voice cracked. You were a research coordinator. I was, Elena said. That was the point. Richard moved closer, palms slightly raised. Ms. Marquez, surely this can be discussed privately. Elena looked at him. Mr. Whitmore, your company has submitted private documents to mine containing falsified procurement figures, misclassified payments, inflated community investment claims, and research language presented without proper attribution. Several of those documents were prepared or approved by Mr. Cole's department. Adrian felt the floor tilt. That's absurd, he said. Camilla opened a folder. Copies of relevant evidence have been provided to key board representatives, investors, and regulatory counsel. Additional documents are being transmitted through secure channels as we speak. Around the ballroom, phones began vibrating. Executives looked down. Investors opened emails. A photographer lowered his camera, then raised it again. Elena continued, as of this afternoon, Marquez Meridian Health has terminated all merger discussions with Whitmore Medical Group. We have also initiated formal notification procedures with oversight bodies regarding suspected financial misconduct. Richard's face turned gray. This is an ambush, he said. No, Elena replied. An ambush relies on surprise. This relies on evidence. Adrian stepped off the altar platform. A security officer shifted slightly, not touching him, simply becoming present enough that Adrian stopped. Elena, he said, lowering his voice as though intimacy could still be summoned. Don't do this. The words struck her with unexpected force, not because they moved her, but because she had heard them in different forms for years. Don't make everything so rigid. Don't take it personally. Don't make me say it. Don't do this. Always beneath the words, the same request, carry the cost of my choices quietly. She looked at the man she had once loved. I didn't do this, Adrian, I documented it. Vanessa suddenly turned on him. What is she talking about? What documents? Nothing, Adrian snapped. She's twisting things. Camilla held up another page. Mr. Cole submitted multiple partnership briefs containing unattributed language from confidential materials created by Ms. Marquez prior to her executive appointment. We also have internal Whitmore correspondence indicating he was aware of discrepancies in reported supplier costs. Adrian's face flushed. You helped me with those briefs when we were married. Elena's expression did not change. I helped you understand ethical healthcare partnerships, she said. You used that understanding to disguise unethical ones. The sentence traveled through the room like a verdict. Vanessa looked at Adrian with sudden disgust, but not moral disgust. The disgust of someone realizing a purchased jewel might be fake. You told me she was nobody, Vanessa whispered. Elena heard it. So did the microphone. Adrian's mouth opened, then closed. Margaret Ives stepped forward now, her silver hair gleaming beneath the chandeliers. She did not raise her voice. Marquez Meridian will not do business with Whitmore Medical Group, its subsidiaries, or any executive materially involved in these submissions. We will also advise partner institutions to review any pending agreements involving Mr. Cole's department. That was the blacklisting, though no one used the word. In healthcare, reputations did not always explode. Sometimes they were simply removed from circulation. Calls stopped. Invitations vanished. Compliance departments flagged names. Boards chose safer candidates. A man like Adrian, whose success depended on borrowed trust, could not survive once trust became toxic. Richard tried one last time. Elena, he said, using her first name as if familiarity could shrink her, your mother and I respected each other. Isabella would never have humiliated a family at a wedding. For the first time that evening, something like anger flashed in Elena's eyes. My mother built clinics for patients your company used as marketing language, she said. Do not borrow her name after falsifying her values. Richard recoiled as if struck. No one laughed now. Vanessa ripped the veil from her hair. Fix this, she hissed at her father. Richard looked around the ballroom at investors leaving their seats, journalists whispering into phones, board members refusing his eye. He had spent decades commanding rooms. This one had slipped from him completely. Adrian reached toward Elena again. Elena, please, we were married. Yes, she said quietly, we were. That softness nearly broke him. You could have told me, he said, you could have told me who you were. Elena stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint scratches on the gold pin, the age of it, the history he had dismissed. I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing. The words did what shouting could not. They stripped him. For a second, no one in the ballroom moved. Then an investor stood and walked out. Another followed. Richard's chief financial officer hurried after them. Vanessa threw her bouquet onto the floor. The white flowers scattered across the aisle at Elena's feet. The wedding did not end with a dramatic collapse of chandeliers or a bride fainting into her father's arms. It ended in fragments, which was more realistic and more brutal. Guests murmured into phones. Lawyers gathered papers. Hotel staff quietly redirected cameras away from exits. Security escorted Elena's team toward a private conference suite as reporters tried to shout questions without seeming too rude for the venue. Adrian remained near the altar long after Vanessa had disappeared. The officiant closed his book. A violinist, unsure what else to do, packed away her instrument. At Adrian's feet lay a single torn petal from Vanessa's bouquet. He stared at it as if it could explain how a life could fall apart in less than 10 minutes. But of course, it had taken years. It had begun in a kitchen with rejected applications. It had grown each time he accepted Elena's labor without honoring its source. It had hardened each time he mistook kindness for lack of power. It had become inevitable the moment he invited her to his wedding not for peace, but for humiliation. The public scandal broke before midnight. Business outlets ran cautious headlines at first. Proposed Whitmore-Marquez merger terminated amid compliance concerns. Then more aggressive ones followed. Executive wedding disrupted by fraud allegations. Marquez Heiress revealed as ex-wife of Whitmore director. Stolen research claims surface in failed healthcare merger. By morning, Adrian's name had become searchable in all the wrong ways. Whitmore Medical Group's board announced an internal review. 2 investors demanded emergency repayment terms. 3 partner hospitals suspended negotiations. A regulatory inquiry opened. Richard Whitmore released a statement about administrative errors, but no one believed him for long because Marquez Meridian's legal disclosures were too precise, too documented, too calm. Vanessa left the city within 48 hours. She did not call Adrian. She sent one message through her assistant requesting the return of personal items, including jewelry, travel documents, and a private membership card she had allowed him to use. The engagement ring, reportedly, remained with her lawyers until questions about payment sources were resolved. Adrian was placed on administrative leave, then terminated. At first he assumed he would recover. Men like Adrian often confuse disgrace with inconvenience. He called former contacts, framing himself as a scapegoat. He suggested Richard had misled him. He implied Elena was a bitter ex-wife using power emotionally. He sent messages beginning with "Hope you're well" and ending with "Let's discuss opportunities." Few replied. Those who did were brief. Given ongoing review, we cannot proceed. Our compliance team has advised against engagement. Wishing you the best. The last phrase became a door closing. Bills arrived, legal fees arrived faster. The luxury apartment that had impressed Vanessa's friends became an obligation he could not meet. His car lease defaulted. Creditors called. Whitmore refused to indemnify him beyond narrow employment protections because the company was trying to save itself by isolating blame. Richard resigned under pressure after leaked emails contradicted his public statements. The Shell vendor investigation widened. Adrian's name remained attached to enough documents that innocence became expensive to argue and impossible to sell. 3 months after the wedding, Adrian filed for bankruptcy protection. The filing listed debts he had hidden from Elena during their marriage: credit cards, personal loans, luxury purchases, private club fees, and money borrowed against future bonuses that would never come. Reading the paperwork later, Elena felt no satisfaction, only a strange, exhausted sadness. He had not been ruined by poverty. He had been ruined by pretending wealth had already chosen him. Elena did not watch his downfall closely. She received updates because Camilla believed in full situational awareness, but she did not search his name at night or savor headlines over coffee. Her life became too full for that. As executive chair of Marquez Meridian Health, she moved carefully, refusing the kind of triumphant public persona journalists wanted from her. She gave one interview only, and when asked about the wedding, she redirected the conversation to procurement transparency and patient trust. The clip went viral anyway, mostly because calm women in power still unsettled people more than angry men abusing it. She launched an internal ethics expansion named the Isabella Initiative, increasing funding for independent compliance audits, rural diagnostic access, and research credit protections for junior medical staff. She visited St. Aurelia without cameras and cried in the supply closet after 3 nurses hugged her so fiercely that her suit wrinkled. She kept the old kitchen table in her new office, not because it matched anything, but because truth had once been built there, even if Adrian had carried it away under his own name. One afternoon, while reviewing grant proposals, Elena found the torn anniversary note in an old book. "I am still here, but I need to know if you are." She did not remember saving it. Perhaps Adrian had thrown away only half and the other half had slipped into her things during the divorce. The paper was creased, the ink slightly faded. Margaret found her holding it. "Regret?" the older woman asked gently. Elena shook her head after a moment. "Grief. For him. For who I was when I wrote it." Margaret sat across from her. Outside the office windows, the city moved beneath late afternoon light. "Do you miss her?" Elena thought about the woman in the green dress waiting at the restaurant, the woman at the stove stirring soup, the woman smoothing rejected applications on a cold tile floor, the woman who had believed love could protect a man from becoming cruel. "Yes," she said, "but I don't want to become her again." Margaret smiled faintly. "Good, let her become part of you, not all of you." The next time Elena saw Adrian, winter had loosened into spring. She was scheduled to speak at the Marquez Meridian Global Health Equity Conference, hosted at the same Grand Meridian Hotel where the wedding had fallen apart. Some board members thought the location was provocative. Elena thought it was practical. The ballroom had excellent acoustics, and had already witnessed one important correction. She arrived through the side entrance, not with 6 bodyguards this time, but with 1 security lead and 2 aides carrying briefing folders. Her speech focused on medical access, ethical scaling, and the danger of confusing market expansion with human care. She had written it herself, every word. "Elena." The voice came from near the service corridor. She knew it before she turned. Adrian stood in a dark coat too thin for the weather. He looked older, though not dramatically so. Life rarely ages the guilty into poetic ruins, it simply removes polish. His hair was less carefully styled. His face held the grey fatigue of someone who had been sleeping badly for months. He carried no confidence now, only the memory of having once performed it well. Her security lead shifted. "It's all right," Elena said. Adrian's eyes moved to the guard, then back to her. The old bitterness flickered. But shame smothered it. "I just wanted 5 minutes." "You have 2. He swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said. Elena waited. The words seemed to surprise him by not being enough. "I know that doesn't fix anything," he added quickly. "I know I hurt you, I lied, I let that world get into my head." Elena's expression remained still. "That world did not get into your head, it found what was already there." He flinched. "I deserved that. I didn't say it to punish you." "I know." But he did not know, not really. Adrian still understood truth as something delivered for effect. Elena could see him trying to locate the angle, the negotiation point, the place where apology might become rescue. He looked past her toward the ballroom doors, where conference attendees moved beneath banners bearing the Marquez Meridian name. "I lost everything," he said. "I heard. No one will touch me, not hospitals, not pharma, not consulting. I can't even get interviews outside the industry once they search my name." Elena said nothing. "My lawyers are drowning me. Richard's team is blaming me for things above my level. Vanessa won't speak to me. I had to sell almost everything." There it was, the inventory of consequences mistaken for remorse. Adrian stepped closer, stopping when security's attention sharpened. "I keep thinking about our first apartment," he said. "The night I threw those applications, you sat on the floor and picked them up. You believed in me when there was no reason to." Elena felt the memory pass through her, but it no longer opened her. "There was a reason," she said. "I loved you." His eyes filled with something desperate. "Could you ever?" "No." The word was quiet, immediate, mercifully clean. He looked down. "I wasn't going to ask for that." "Yes, you were." Silence. Then in a smaller voice, "Maybe not marriage, just help. A statement, something saying I wasn't central to the fraud, something that lets me work again." Elena almost smiled, not from amusement, but from recognition. Even now he had come to her for language, for credibility, for a sentence he could stand on. "All those years," she said softly, "you thought I was useful." "No, Elena. You loved me when my usefulness felt like devotion. You resented me when it looked like limits. You discarded me when you found someone you thought was more useful. And now you're here because you need me to be useful again." His face crumpled slightly. "That's not fair." "It is exact." A staff member appeared near the corridor. "Ms. Marquez, they're ready for you." Elena nodded. Adrian looked at her with panic rising. "Please, I made the biggest mistake of my life." Elena studied him one final time. The man before her was not the villain of a fairy tale. He was something more ordinary and therefore more tragic, a person who had been loved well and chose admiration instead, a person who mistook access for worth, a person who wanted forgiveness to function like reputation management. "No, Adrian," she said, "your mistake was not leaving me. Your mistake was thinking my value depended on whether you chose me." He closed his eyes. She walked past him. This time, he did not try to follow. Inside the ballroom, hundreds of physicians, researchers, policymakers, and advocates rose as Elena approached the stage. Applause rolled toward her, not wild, not worshipful, but deeply respectful. The kind of applause earned by steadiness rather than spectacle. For a moment, standing behind the podium, Elena saw everything at once. Her mother fastening the gold pin before a mirror, Adrian laughing under flickering kitchen light, Vanessa's white bouquet scattered across the aisle, Margaret's steady eyes across the boardroom, patients waiting in clinics, nurses charting through exhaustion, young coordinators whose names belonged on papers men might otherwise steal. She touched the pin on her lapel. Then she began. "My mother used to say that medicine without conscience is commerce wearing a white coat," Elena told the room. "For years, I thought that warning applied only to institutions. I was wrong. It applies to people too, to every choice we make when we believe no one important is watching." Outside the ballroom, Adrian stood alone in the corridor. Through the closed doors, he heard applause again. Once he had believed success meant entering rooms where people stood for him. He had married a woman who would have stood beside him in any room, rich or poor, praised or ignored. He had mocked her for being ordinary because he had never learned how extraordinary loyalty was when it had no audience. Now the doors remained closed. Not locked, not guarded against him by force. Simply no longer his to enter. Months became a year. Whitmore Medical Group did not disappear entirely, but it was broken apart, sold in pieces to satisfy creditors and stabilize patient services. Marquez Meridian acquired several clinics at court-supervised auction, retaining staff wherever possible and renaming nothing for vanity. Richard Whitmore retreated into private legal battles. Vanessa resurfaced in European society, pages beside a shipping heir, smiling with the determined brightness of someone rewriting history before anyone else could. Adrian moved to a smaller city and took contract work far below the status he once imagined beneath him. Whether that humbled him or merely taught him to hide ambition better, Elena never knew. She stopped receiving updates after the legal matters concluded. Some stories end not with forgiveness or revenge, but with distance. Elena's story did not end at the wedding or the conference or the headlines. It continued in board meetings where she asked uncomfortable questions, in clinics where she listened more than she spoke, in late nights when she worked alone at the old kitchen table, reading proposals from young researchers who reminded her of herself before power had a name. It continued in moments of loneliness. She did not romanticize, and strength she did not perform. On the second anniversary of her executive appointment, Elena visited her mother's mausoleum before dawn. The cemetery was quiet, washed in blue morning light. She carried white lilies and a folded copy of the annual report showing expanded rural care access, reduced patient debt burden, and new protections for research staff attribution. Numbers, yes, but behind them were people. Isabella would have cared about that. Elena placed the lilies in the stone vase. "I think I understand now," she said. The wind moved softly through cypress trees. "You didn't hide me because power was shameful. You hid me because power attracts performances. You wanted me to know the difference between love and admiration before both became expensive." She laughed a little, wiping at one tear. "I learned the hard way." For a while, she stood in silence. Then she removed the gold pin from her coat and held it in her palm. She had worn it through exposure, triumph, grief, and rebuilding. Its edges were worn smooth by decades of women who had carried more than anyone saw. "I'll keep watching," she promised. As she left the cemetery, the sun rose over the city's glass towers, striking them one by one until they looked briefly like fire. Somewhere beyond them stood the Grand Meridian Hotel. Somewhere beyond that, St. Aurelia Hospital was beginning another shift. Somewhere, a frightened patient was signing a consent form, a nurse was skipping breakfast, a researcher was hoping her work would be credited, and a young man in a cheap suit was probably dreaming of higher floors. Elena knew ambition itself was not evil. Her mother had been ambitious, so was she. Ambition could build clinics, fund research, challenge corrupt boards, and open doors for people who had been left outside. But ambition without gratitude became hunger. Ambition without ethics became theft. Ambition without love became Adrian Cole standing in a corridor, listening to applause meant for the woman he had thrown away. Elena stepped into the waiting car. Her phone buzzed with messages, schedules, problems requiring decisions. She glanced once at the skyline, then opened the first briefing folder. There was work to do. And this time, every room she entered knew exactly who she was. Not because Adrian had chosen her. Not because Vanessa had underestimated her. Not because Richard Whitmore had feared her. But because Elena Marquez had finally stopped hiding the crown from people who mistook kindness for emptiness. The medical empire was hers, yes. The money, the board votes, the hotels, the clinics, the influence, all of it belonged to her by law and legacy. But the greater inheritance was the lesson her mother had planted years before, and Adrian had watered with betrayal until it grew too large to ignore. When someone thinks you have nothing to give, watch what they take from you anyway. Elena had watched. Then she had taken back the truth.